The world hailed the 113-year-old woman who survived the COVID pandemic as a miracle, but only I knew why she was still alive. When my grandmother, Isabella, was on her deathbed, the administrator, Vidal, lied that the medicine had run out. She died. The next day, I watched them administer that very last dose to Maria Brañas, the 113-year-old woman. Her daughter called it a miracle. I knew it was a secret deal. They thought I was a dedicated nurse when I volunteered to care for her. They didn't know I was just looking for the perfect opportunity, a glitch in the security camera, a night when no family was by her side. They had chosen to save one person by letting another die, and I was about to make a similar choice. The clock struck 4 in the afternoon. For the other nurses, it was the end of an exhausting shift. For me, it was just time to change into a cleaner uniform. I took off my white blouse, stained with a few unidentifiable smudges, put on an identical one, and walked from hallway B, where I was an employee, to hallway D, where I was a granddaughter. My grandmother Isabella's room was always quiet. So quiet I could clearly hear the steady drip of the IV machine and the soft hiss of the oxygen monitor. She lay there, small in the vast hospital bed. I began my familiar routine, checking the IV bag, smoothing the wrinkles in her blanket, then looking up at the vital signs monitor. Those numbers were my enemy. Heart rate 85, blood pressure 90/60, oxygen saturation 92%. They weren't falling, but they weren't rising either. They just stayed there, day after day, like a mockery of all my efforts. The lung infection had resisted every drug we had. Her skin was so thin I could see the faint blue veins beneath, and each of her breaths was shallow and labored. We were losing this battle. Our only hope, a fragile glimmer, lay in an experimental drug that Dr. Ramos had fought for months to get approved. Just as I was about to change the IV bag, the door creaked open. Dr. Ramos stepped in. He looked as tired as ever, but today there was a strange urgency in his dark-circled eyes. "Is something wrong, doctor?" I asked, my heart beginning to beat a little faster. "Anna, the drug was approved," he said directly, without any preamble. My whole body froze. The IV bag nearly slipped from my hand. It's here. It arrives tomorrow morning," he confirmed. But then he took a deep breath. "But there's a problem. A big one. The entire city could only secure a single dose. One dose." The hope that had just surged through me was instantly extinguished by a cold panic. A single dose for a hospital full of people waiting to die. Could my grandmother possibly be the lucky one? I looked at him, not daring to ask, afraid the answer would break me. Dr. Ramos seemed to understand my fear. He walked over, opened her medical file, and turned it towards me. He pointed to the first line on the priority list, carefully circled in red ink. "Isabella Garcia." "Don't worry," he said, his voice firm. "Your grandmother is at the top of the list. According to every protocol, that dose is hers. There's no debate." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. It felt as if a tight cord that had been constricting my chest for weeks had finally loosened. "Doctor," Ramos gave me one last nod and left, leaving me alone in a room no longer filled with despair. I pulled a plastic chair close to her bed and took her frail hand in mine. Its warmth was faint, but it was there. "Grandma, can you hear me?" I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "The medicine is here. They approved it. A single dose. And it's yours." I saw her eyelids flutter. A single tear rolled from the corner of her closed eye. She was listening. She understood. I leaned in closer, so she could feel every word I said, so she could believe it just as I did. "You're going to make it," I said, pouring all my hope, all my faith into that sentence. "I promise." That sense of relief lasted for exactly 15 minutes. I was at the nurse's station, recording my grandmother's vitals in her chart, when a sharp, authoritative voice cut through the quiet hallway. "I don't care about your protocols, Mr. Vidal. I want what's best for my mother." I looked up. Standing before Mr. Vidal, the nursing home administrator, was a woman I had never seen before. She wore a beige cashmere coat and expensive high heels, utterly out of place in the hospital setting. Mr. Vidal's back was slightly hunched, and he nodded repeatedly like a puppet while the woman spoke. "Ma'am Rosa, we are doing our best," Mr. Vidal said, his tone fawning. "Your mother, Mrs. Maria Branius, is being monitored very closely." Rosa. Maria Branius. I knew that name. She was the 113-year-old woman at the end of the hall. A living legend, but her condition was also critical. Rosa scoffed, a smile devoid of any warmth. "Your best? You call leaving my mother in a standard room your best? My mother is not just any patient. She is a treasure." She took a step forward, and Mr. Vidal instinctively took a step back. "Listen closely, Mr. Vidal," Rosa said, her voice a hiss through clenched teeth. "I will not let my mother die because of your incompetence. I will do whatever it takes for her to live. You understand what whatever it takes means, don't you?" She paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "And I will pay any price." I stood there, pen still in hand, and felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't know what they were specifically talking about, but I knew the tone of someone accustomed to using power to get their way. And I knew the look of a man like Vidal when he was about to break a rule. In my mind, two thoughts collided: a single dose of medicine, and a woman willing to do whatever it takes. The relief I had felt moments ago was gone. In its place was a distinct unease, a cold feeling that the promise I had just made to my grandmother was perhaps no longer certain. The next morning I arrived at the facility very early. The unease from the day before lingered, but I tried to push it away. I told myself that protocol was protocol, and no one could change that. At 10 o'clock sharp, a staff member from the pharmacy pushed a small cart to the nurse's station. On it was a sealed, refrigerated box. Inside was the dose, my grandmother's hope. I signed for it, feeling my hand tremble slightly. I prepared everything: the syringe, alcohol swabs, the IV line. I wanted everything to be perfect. Then Vidal called me. His voice over the phone was cold and decisive. "In my office now, Anna. We need to talk." I walked into his office, my heart pounding. He didn't invite me to sit, just stood with his arms crossed behind his desk. "That dose," he began without any preamble. "We've given it to Mrs. Maria Branius." I stood frozen. It took a few seconds for his words to register. "That's impossible," I said, my voice louder than I intended. My grandmother was first on the list. Dr. Ramos confirmed it. "Mrs. Branius's condition took a sudden turn for the worse last night," Vidal said, his voice as flat and mechanical as a machine. "It was an emergency. We had to prioritize." "An emergency?" I nearly shouted. "My grandmother has been dying for weeks. Is that not an emergency? Protocol is protocol. You can't just change it." Vidal looked at me, a blank, emotionless stare. "I've made my decision, Nurse Anna. You may go now." I stood there, helpless. I knew I had lost. I turned and walked out of his office without another word. That night, I sat by her bed. There was no more hope, no more promises. I just held her hand, feeling it grow colder, while I listened to her breathing grow weaker. The hiss of the machines filled the silence, until it became a flat line and a long, unending beep. My promise was broken. The next morning, the nursing home was no longer quiet. It was swarming with television news vans and journalists with cameras. The news of Maria Branius's miracle had spread. They talked about the extraordinary resilience of a 113-year-old who had cheated death. They praised the iron will that had pulled her through the crisis. I stood at a distance, looking through a glass window. I saw Rosa, her daughter, standing before the cameras. She was smiling, a victor's smile, as she told the fabricated story about her mother. To me, it was a disgusting play. Every word she spoke, every smile she gave, was an insult to my grandmother's death. My grief was no longer an empty feeling. It had solidified, turning into something hard and cold. It now had a specific shape. It had a name: Maria Branius. And I decided right then and there, she would pay for my grandmother's death. After the funeral, I returned to work. People looked at me with pity. They offered hollow words of comfort. I just nodded and smiled. My grief was not for them. It was my own, a cold energy that was quietly reshaping who I was. I sought out Vidal. "Sir," I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. "I have a request. I would like to be transferred to the special care team for Mrs. Maria Branyas." Vidal looked at me, a little surprised. "Why?" "Her story. It's truly inspiring," I lied smoothly. "After what happened to my grandmother, I want to contribute to caring for someone with such an extraordinary will to live. It's my way of overcoming my own pain." Vidal seemed convinced by the lie. Perhaps he wanted to believe he had done the right thing. He nodded in agreement. And so, it began. My cover was that of a devoted nurse, an admirer of Maria. I changed her diapers, spoon-fed her, read books to her. But when no one was looking, I was a predator. My eyes didn't see a patient. They saw a target. I memorized everything. 10 p.m. was when she took her sleeping pills. The security camera at the end of the hall had a 30-second blind spot as it panned. Rosa, her daughter, always left at 9 and never returned until the next morning. The night nurse usually made rounds to other rooms between 2 and 3 in the morning. My nursing knowledge was no longer for saving lives. It was for calculating the perfect way to take one. I began to secretly hoard diazepam, a powerful sedative. I took a small amount each day from the medicine stock, an amount so minuscule no one would notice. A large enough dose injected intravenously would cause respiratory failure. For a 113-year-old woman with a weak heart, it would look exactly like a natural heart attack. No one would suspect a thing. I had my plan. I had my weapon. Now, I just had to wait for the right moment. The closer I got to my target, the more I saw things the television cameras could never capture. They praised her as a symbol of life, but the woman I cared for daily was nothing like that. She showed no signs of someone who had conquered death. Maria Branyas's eyes were always vacant, as if she were staring at a place far away, a place without joy. The first sign appeared one afternoon. Rosa brought in a container of food from a fancy restaurant. She opened the lid, and the aroma of shark fin soup filled the room. "Look what I brought, Mother," Rosa said cheerfully. "Your favorite. I had the chef make it specially for you." Rosa scooped up a spoonful of soup, blew on it gently, and brought it to her mother's lips. But Maria turned her head away. Just a slight, weak shake of her head, but it was full of refusal. "You need to eat to get stronger," Rosa insisted, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. "I spent all afternoon getting this for you." Maria remained silent, her lips pressed tightly together. Finally, Rosa gave up. She set the bowl down on the table with frustration. I stood there, witnessing it all, and felt that something was wrong. A person who had just escaped death's door was refusing her favorite food. The second sign was even clearer. It was one night, as I was preparing her daily supplement shot. It was just a multivitamin, completely harmless. I sterilized the injection site on her frail arm. As I brought the needle close, Maria's hand moved slightly, closing around my wrist. Her grip was so weak I could barely feel it. "Don't." I heard a whisper. It was so faint I thought I had imagined it. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" I asked. She looked at me, and in her cloudy eyes there was a flicker of panic. "Please." Then she closed her eyes, as if she had used up all her strength. I stood there for a moment, the needle still hovering over her arm. I assumed the old woman was confused, a common symptom in the elderly. I dismissed it, continued my work, and administered the shot. But that night, as I lay in bed, her words echoed in my head. "Don't. Please." It didn't sound like the words of a confused person. It sounded like the plea of someone who was suffering. But suffering from what? She had everything. She had the life that should have belonged to my grandmother. That night was the perfect time. Rosa had to fly abroad for business, a 2-day trip. The night nurse was a young newcomer, often careless. The weather report called for a storm, a perfect cover for any chaos. I had been waiting for this opportunity for weeks. I hid the vial of diazepam in my blouse pocket, feeling its cold weight. The plan was ready in my mind. I would enter her room at 2 a.m., saying I needed to check her IV line. Then, I would inject the lethal dose. It would all be over in minutes. Quick, silent, and it would look like a natural death. I entered the room. Maria was sleeping, her breathing steady. The room was lit only by the dim light from the hallway. I pulled the syringe from my pocket and filled it. My hand did not shake. To create a convincing scene, I needed everything to look normal. I started tidying her bedside table, arranging the medicine bottles and water glass. My hand brushed against an old leather-bound book, knocking it to the floor. As I bent down to pick it up, something smaller fell out from between its pages. It was a small, worn notebook, its cover frayed. It didn't look like it belonged in this room. Instead of proceeding with my plan, an inexplicable curiosity compelled me. I sat down in the chair by the bed and switched on the smallest nightlight. I opened the notebook. Inside were lines of handwritten text, shaky, almost illegible. It was Maria's handwriting, and it was a diary. I flipped to the most recent entries, pages written during the time she was sick. Day 15. Rosa brought the medicine today. I heard the nurse, what was her name, talking to her about someone else. Someone named Isabella. They said that person needed this dose more. I knew it. I tried to shake my head. I told her I didn't need it. I have lived long enough. I froze. Isabella. She had written my grandmother's name. I read on, my heart pounding in my chest. Day 16. She doesn't listen. She holds my hand, forces me to take every pill. She cries. She says she can't live without me, that I'm her only reason for existing. I want to push her away, but this body no longer obeys me. Her love is suffocating me. Day 17. I lived, but that woman, Isabella, did not. I know it, even though no one tells me. Every time I close my eyes, I see the face of a person I have never met. With every supplement they inject into me, I feel like I am drinking poison. I turn to the last page. The final entry scrawled messily. My daughter's love is turning me into a murderer. I am living in place of someone who died. I closed the notebook. The vial of poison in my blouse pocket suddenly felt heavy and grotesque. The cold rage I had nurtured for weeks suddenly vanished, leaving a horrifying emptiness in its place. The enemy I wanted to kill did not exist. The woman lying in that bed, the person I had hated with my entire soul, was also a victim. She was a prisoner, trapped in her own body, tortured by a guilt she never wanted. My entire plan for revenge had crumbled. I sat motionless in the chair, the diary still in my hand. Outside, the storm began to rage, the wind whistling through the window frames. The vial of poison in my pocket was no longer a weapon. It was just a sickening testament to the person I had almost become. The rage was gone. The hatred was gone. In their place was an emptiness. And then, a deep wave of compassion washed over me. Compassion for the woman in the bed. She wasn't a thief. She was a victim, just like my grandmother, trapped in a tragedy created by others. I looked at Maria, sleeping a restless sleep. I thought of my grandmother, Isabella, who had died in silence. And I realized that killing Maria would not bring justice for Isabella. It would only create another victim, turning me into the same kind of monster as Rosa and Vidal. My objective had changed. It was no longer about revenge. It was about justice. Justice for both grandmothers. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen's light illuminated my face. I carefully placed each page of the diary on the table, smoothing it out. Then I started taking pictures. Click, click, click. Each snap of the camera was another nail in the coffin of the lie Rosa had built. I captured every shaky line, every word filled with guilt and anguish. This was no longer an old woman's diary. This was irrefutable evidence. When I was done, I placed the notebook back inside the old book and left it on the floor, exactly where I found it. I picked up the vial of poison, went to the bathroom, and poured the entire solution down the toilet. As I watched the clear liquid swirl away, I felt an invisible weight being washed from my soul. I had a new weapon, not poison. The truth. And this time, I would use it correctly. The next morning, I waited. I waited until I received a notification confirming that Rosa's flight had landed. I knew she would go straight home to rest after her long trip. That's when I started setting the trap. I went into Maria's room. She was awake, and I helped her sit up, propping her back against the pillows. I took her hand. Its frail touch no longer repulsed me. "Mrs. Maria," I said softly, just loud enough for her to hear. "It's all going to be over soon. I promise." She looked at me, a strange understanding in her cloudy eyes. Then, I went to the nurse's station, pulled out my phone, and dialed Rosa's number. I took a deep breath, preparing for my performance. "Hello, is this Mrs. Rosa?" I said, my voice filled with practiced panic and urgency. "This is Anna, your mother's nurse. Something is wrong." I heard a rustling on the other end, then Rosa's sharp voice. "What is it? Speak quickly." "It's Maria. She's suddenly having trouble breathing. Her skin is turning blue. But the problem is, she refuses to take her medicine. She keeps pushing my hand away and shaking her head. I don't know what to do. Can you come right away?" I heard a muffled curse, then the sound of things being knocked over. "I'm on my way. Don't let anyone in the room. Don't touch anything. I'm on my way." She hung up. I knew I had about 30 minutes. Rosa, in a panic over losing control, wouldn't think to call Vidal or anyone else. She would come here to handle it herself. Immediately after the call, I opened a secure messaging app. I sent all the photos of the diary to a number I had researched beforehand, the number for Police Inspector David Chen, a man known for being tough and uncompromising. I included a short message. "Inspector Chen, I am a nurse at the Olot nursing home. This is evidence of a negligent homicide related to the deceased patient Isabella Garcia last month. The perpetrator, Rosa Branias, is on her way to room 301. Please come immediately. There is an active situation." I hit send. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the animals to walk into it. Less than 20 minutes later, the door burst open. Rosa stormed in, her face flushed with haste and anger. She didn't even glance at me, striding directly to the bed where Maria was sitting. In her hand was a pill and a glass of water she had just grabbed from the counter. "Mother," she snapped. "What is wrong with you now? Take your medicine." She brought the pill to Maria's lips, intending to force her to take it as always. But this time, an arm blocked her. It was mine. "She won't be taking anything," I said, my voice calm but firm. Rosa spun around, her eyes narrowing with fury. "Who the hell do you think you are to stop me? Get out of my way." I didn't move. Instead, I pulled the small diary from my blouse pocket. I opened it to the page I had marked. "I think you should hear this first," I said, and began to read aloud, my voice clear and steady. "Today Rosa brought the medicine. I heard the nurse talking to her about someone else. Someone named Isabella. They said that person needed this dose more." I tried to shake my head. I told her I didn't need it. The color drained from Rosa's face. Anger morphed into panic. "Where did you get that? Give it to me." She lunged at me, trying to snatch the notebook. I took a step back, my hand still gripping the diary. "Are you afraid to hear the truth, Mrs. Rosa? The truth that your mother never wanted that medicine?" I continued reading, my voice louder. "My daughter's love is turning me into a murderer. I am living in place of someone who died." "Shut up!" Rosa screamed, her composure completely shattered. She grabbed for me, and we struggled over the notebook. Just then, something completely unexpected happened. Maria, who had been silent and passive for so long, suddenly acted. With the last of her strength, she leaned forward from the bed. Her frail hand didn't reach for Rosa, but instead grasped my arm, the one holding the diary. She held on tight, a protective gesture. Rosa froze. She stared at her mother, then at her mother's hand shielding her enemy. Maria looked directly into her daughter's eyes. There was no more fear in them, only pain and a silent judgment. It was the first time she had truly fought back against her daughter's toxic love. Slam! The door was thrown open again. But this time, it wasn't Rosa. Two uniformed police officers stood there, followed by Inspector Chen. "Rosa Branyas?" Inspector Chen said, his voice cold. "You're under arrest for questioning." Rosa looked from her mother to me, then to the police officers. The performance was over. She slumped, all the fight gone out of her. What followed was a whirlwind. Rosa was handcuffed and taken away immediately. From the diary and my testimony, the police quickly tracked down Vidal. He was arrested in his office while trying to destroy records. The story of the miracle of Maria Branyas collapsed overnight. In its place, it became the Olot nursing home scandal. The same news channels that had once praised her now scrambled to expose the truth. They discovered that Rosa had paid Vidal a large sum of money for the dose. The investigation widened, uncovering numerous other cases where Vidal had given priority to wealthy patients, leaving the less fortunate to die. The legend of a woman with extraordinary resilience was over. It was replaced by a stark tale of power, money, and systemic corruption. A few weeks later, I stood before my grandmother Isabella's grave. The simple, dignified headstone was engraved with her name. I placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums on it, her favorite. A gentle breeze blew, carrying the scent of grass. I had thought that when this day came, I would feel a sense of triumph. I had imagined a sweet victory, the feeling of a successful avenger, but I felt nothing of the sort. There was no satisfaction, no joy, only a profound stillness. I hadn't avenged her. Vengeance would have been injecting that poison into Maria, but I hadn't done that. Instead, I had chosen a different path. And standing here, before the grave of the person I loved most, I realized I didn't have the gratification of a revenger, but I had gained something far more precious. Peace. The peace of having done the right thing. The peace of choosing justice over another crime. The peace that comes from letting the truth speak for itself. I stood there for a long time, thinking of nothing, just letting that stillness envelop me. After everything settled down, I considered quitting my job, leaving this place filled with so many painful memories. But then I realized this wasn't just the place where my grandmother died. It was also the place where I had found myself again, after nearly getting lost in hatred. So, I stayed. A month after the arrests, I was assigned a regular shift. I walked past hallway D, and out of habit, glanced into room 301. The room no longer felt suffocating and oppressive. The window was wide open, letting in the morning Sunday. Maria Branyas was sitting in an armchair, no longer lying motionless in bed. She was looking out at the garden. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to step inside. She heard my footsteps and turned. I had prepared myself to see a face of guilt, of suffering. But no, the torment was gone from her expression. In its place was a serenity, a quiet acceptance. She looked at me, a long look, with no fear, no pleading. Then she gave a slight nod, just a small nod, but it contained everything. It was a thank you. It was an apology. It was an acknowledgement of all we had been through together. I smiled back, a genuine smile, for the first time in a very long time. No words were needed between us. We were two strangers, bound together by a tragedy. One who had almost become a murderer, the other who had been made the symbol of a crime. But now, standing in this room, we were simply two survivors, two people who had escaped a tragedy born from blind love. And in that silence, we found our final understanding.